because one of the things that I was going to touch upon was this model of stock trading, because it's one of the things you've done and done effectively. You hear about people doing it, and I was traveling doing a tour of the East Coast just a couple of months back, and there's a guy who's a cabinet maker with 100 acres, but he's done the course, and he's just put multi-species cover crops. He's got irrigation, multi-species cover crops over the whole thing. He brings cows in, he's doing the stock trading things, just steers. 5 weeks, they just come in and fatten them up. And so he's got all the figures. It's all done really nicely. So he's got his agent's fees and he's got his transport costs, and he's bringing it in for 5 weeks and taking them back. And he makes $250 per head on that 5 week period. And you do the sums, it's $2,500 per head of cattle per year, because it's a full year thing. And so that was the first sort of dramatically proven example of that extreme. Nothing stays for longer than 5 weeks, and that's the multi-species cover crops. And he had 130 head on the 100 acres, and there was so much food it was ridiculous. At that particular point, it had rained as well, and it was just, he foliar sprays the cover crops, and it was a tremendous example of the potential of that. But you've been doing some form of stock trading yourself, have you?
Yes, so we do it for a different reason. So again, it's what your country's capable of.
Yeah.
So he's most probably got a really good solid soil where he can planting good quality. He's got his water sorted.
Yeah.
So you can see he's covered all his bases. He's really looked at what his land is capable of. And then he's going, well, how can I manage so I know how much feed I have ahead of me? So therefore, I know I can buy X number of cattle, and in that time I get X weight gain.
Yeah.
So the only thing that he's risking is price.
Yeah.
So if he understands watching cattle markets, which again, the problem in Australia, we don't have a lot of data, but there's a lot coming out of America, you can pretty much predict that in that time, that yes, if it's going in a certain pattern, and there's a pattern watching that Gann talks about and good share traders talk about, is the same thing. Cattle will increase in a certain way, and then if it turns, then it will decrease in a certain way. So a lot of traders work on buying and selling on the same market. So they say you cost average. But good traders will say, well, it's a falling market, so maybe I'll sit out of this for a while, and they can work out when to do that. We basically look at whether we have a gross margin. The only reason we want to trade is when we have a good season like this where we don't have enough cattle.
Yeah.
So it's a risk management strategy. So we've got the choice of, can we get a trade, but our turnaround's slower because we don't have those high-powered pastures.
Yeah.
So our trading is, we will look at what the market's doing, have a look at whether it's going up, sideways, what sort of pattern it's fitting, and then we'll do our gross margins and saying we can buy this class of cattle or this class or this class or whatever. What's our out if things go pear-shaped? How can we get out of them? Because we most probably need to hold them for 6 months. So that's a big challenge to do that. So if we haven't gotten out, we won't trade, and we'll just sacrifice the paddock, take it out of the rotation and maybe clean it up with a slasher or whatever, and do a slash and trace element mineral mix while we're doing that, which is actually cheaper than losing money in a trade.
Yeah, I see.
Where most people don't do those sums. Watch it out. So if we can buy organic cattle, our out is a lot easier because we know we've got a guaranteed market for cow and calf. If we're buying non-organic and calve the cow down, we know we've got a market for the calf as long as she's been here for before the third trimester, and then the cow has to go back in the conventional. If we're doing a heifer or steer that's not organic, it's high risk because the price fluctuates very much to weather.
So really the organic thing has made it a hell of a lot better business.
Makes a lot better because we know our price does this, where you look at the cattle market, it was up here, had that patch of dry, it dropped, enormously. People say share trading's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's pussy compared to trading cattle. It really is, because,
Did you get stuck caught on that or not?
On
that crash after the dry?
No, we didn't, because we didn't do any trading then.
Okay.
So we bought coming out of the dry.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then once the price got too high, we didn't buy anymore. Okay. And then we saw the price stabilise and then start to drop. And once it had dropped sufficiently, we can get back in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We'll just open this up so we can, before we get too dark, we can cover some other things. You mentioned with debt load, for example, to pose the question, who owns me and who do I work for? Can you sort of elaborate on that idea?
Yeah. I don't know whether you ever thought of this. There's a guy, Phil Anderson, who's an Australian guy and did very well understanding. He studied under Gann, or studied Gann's work. He's the one who studied under Fred Harrison, worked out the real estate cycle.
Yeah.
And he said, have you ever thought about how many days you actually work for someone else? So if you're paying on a wage and you're paying 34 cents in the dollar, you work 124 days for the government.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair enough.
So now you go and borrow some money. So you borrow a big stick to buy a house in the city for city people, or you borrow it to buy a farm. Let's say your interest rate works at about 40% of your total income. So who are you working for then?
The bank.
You're only paying interest. We're not talking about the principal you're paying off. Yeah. So if it's about 40% of your total income, then goes to that. So how many days is that in the year?
That's 4 out of 10 days.
So it's about 170 days.
Yeah.
So now you've done nearly 300 days, 290 days, you're working for someone else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're going, why can't we get ahead?
Yeah.
So when you look at it that way, and that's what Phil Anderson said, you've got to understand this, that our system we have set up is structured to keep us working for someone else who's making a lot of money out of it.
Yeah.
So is that good for what we're trying to do for this planet?
Yeah, probably not.
It's not, because you and I, got all these things we want to do on our farms, and yet we don't have the time to do it.
No.
We don't have the money to do it.
And we're spending the time working for someone else.
Yeah.
So I'll just get some of these questions before we go into darkness. You mentioned this concept of healthy soils directly linked to the healthy future of our country. And it's a big statement, but that's what you feel?
I think it's a given, Graeme.
I agree, of course.
Yeah, if we're eating living food, and I think this is the big issue is, and we can prove this now. Have you come across the work with Biophotons?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's top, yeah.
And food density. So both of those are now really measurable. So if we're eating living food, so it was so interesting. We were down on the coast for a week and we ate out a lot. And every meal, after the meal, you just felt like the food was sitting heavy, that it hadn't nourished you. It tasted okay, it was all right. But as soon as we came home and had food that we'd taken from our gardens, that had got really good nutrition, had our own meat, you could feel the life in your body. You could feel the energy come back into you. Now, is that just my imagination?
No, I don't think so.
Because if you think about our health issues across this planet, Graeme, are we doing things right in our food industry? The answer is no. So will factory food do that? Will food grown in hydroponics and greenhouses, you can control all your risk, but is that going to do that?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. So, we've got to try and get these paddocks really firing. We've got to get those trace elements up. We've got to get the nutrition so it reflects in your cattle. Yep. And we're not there yet. You see the cattle with brown coats, that's copper deficiency.
Yeah.
You see love grass in these paddocks. We're lacking minerals, we're lacking microbes, we're lacking, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
It's work in progress.
Yeah, it's an important work in progress
Yeah.
too. You suggested that farmers are seeing truths often from vested interests when addressing the environment, maybe their farm, their enterprises, and their life passions and expectations. What do you suggest is the best path forward on that front?
So what do you actually mean by truth, passion, and
the concept of it was actually in your notes.
Yeah.
Where the people are invariably getting their facts from vested interests as the model, and it's
exactly.
everywhere. It's the news. It's everything you look at. It's Sky News. It's whatever. It's coming from vested interests. But how do you step out of that cycle? And that includes your information on how to move forward on the farm.
Yeah. So I think the greatest thing we need to teach everyone in society is, whether we like it or not, education is really, really important. But education also narrows our focus. So you think about the people that you've got around who are very wise people. What have they done? They've questioned everything. They're never happy just going, well, science says this, but something doesn't feel right. So you hear my words, something doesn't feel right. So you're trusting that gut intuition. Now, successful farmers, way back, always successful because they trusted their intuition. So they understand they were told to do things this way, but they'd always do it a little bit differently. They always would go, no, that's not quite right. What the agronomist told me, I'm not seeing and feeling that that's working, so let's try something different. So the question is, do we now, with our higher education and forcing our kids to go to university to be more streamlined, they can now access an enormous amount of information through AI and all of that. School's nearly irrelevant now.
Yes, it is.
But how do we teach them discernment?
Yeah.
So that's a great question. And I really believe it's part of our role as a grandparent and a parent, we have to find ways to teach our kids discernment. And that is to get them to quieten their minds, sit quietly and start to trust their intuition. There's tools we've got, and you mentioned one before we started this. We can use dowsing because it's a confirmation of our intuition. So we can make a statement. So let's say, Graeme, you came to me and said, Shane, let's put on this, this and this because it's going to benefit your soil. And I go, that's great, Graeme, but something's not quite right there. I just don't feel comfortable. So let's check. Let's douse, and anyone can learn to douse. So what is dowsing? You are just trusting and confirming your intuition. So it's our sixth sense.
Yeah.
Every animal here has a sixth sense. We have a sixth sense.
Yeah.
So when we learn to open that up, then we can go saying, oh, well, yeah, we'll put on the zinc, the copper, the cobalt, the moly. Oh, saying no to moly. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense scientifically, the soil test.
Well, I see it, and I don't usually acknowledge this because I have this hard science background, but I use the pendulum and dowse for many, many things.
Yeah.
And I can do a soil test, and it's pretty much matches the conventional soil test.
Yeah.
But you can't really explain that, in my opinion, through purely intuition, because how can you possibly intuit that you're lacking copper other than seeing visible signs of it? I almost see it as like it's your link to the great beyond, or it's your link to God or whatever, and you can just ask questions and you get the answers. And it is something that everyone can do. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool that I've never talked about on tape because that's not who I am as far as my reputation is about hard science and driving things forward. But I'm telling you, and you know, the dowsing is a wonderful, wonderful tool.
And I think you think about it now, Graeme, we can get so much information. Like, we wanted to do some research on buffalo fly. So my nephew. He works in the AI space and he writes programs. And this is what he teaches to business now. He goes into business and saying, I can write you any program. How do you know whether it's good stuff or bad stuff? And so he goes and teaches them discernment. He's a very moral guy, very Christian guy.
Yeah.
And he says, you have to discern whether this is rubbish or good. Because I can feed you anything and you will run down a rabbit warren that may break your business. So it's interesting. So I think it's essential now that we start talking about this, Graeme, and saying it's not weird, it's a sixth sense. We trust our sight, we trust our taste, we trust our smell. So a good farmer, and we were going to do this mostly at a time, we're going to dig up some of the soil and have a smell. Because it will tell you so much.
It does.
Now, you can say, well, is that scientific? No, it's not. But a good farmer knows when the soil's smelling good, things are starting to happen.
Well, it is science, because now we understand soil life and we understand that there's
Exactly.
a creature called Actinomycetes that makes the delicious smell, and if they're working, everything's working, and you're cooking, so your nose
that's
knows.
it. So then why can't we start to use our sixth sense, the next one up, and start to say, well, we have this deep connection, and this is quantum physics, this is a quantum matrix, that everything's connected, so we can tap into the intelligence of this landscape. We can tap into the intelligence of the quantum field.
Yeah.
So
I remember Jerry Brunetti, the wonderful Jerry Brunetti, who was a huge mentor in my history, came over with Terry brought him over for a conference in Brisbane, and he rang me on the Sunshine Coast and he said, you've got to come and do this half-day thing with Patrick Manaway. And Patrick was teaching people how to dowse.
Yeah.
It's exactly that story. So, and Jerry was fascinated, but I'd already been doing it for years. I mean, but I just get very quiet. But it is something that everyone, including you, Claudia, you need to learn how to do it. I've been promising to teach you.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it. Everyone can do it.
But it's a natural instinct, and I love. So if you go and dowse, learn to muscle test someone else, because that gives you a bit more confidence. Because David Hawkins, who was a medical and a doctor and a psychologist and then a spiritual teacher, he just said, well, if you think about it logically, we have an innate ability to sense whether something's good for us or not good for us. So those animals know whether the electric fence is on or not on. Now, what sense are they using? So it's a sixth sense.
Yeah.
So we have that built into our body because we're animals that need to discern if we're going to eat, oh, look at that, there's a witchetty grub there. Is it good for us or not? If you put it near your body and it was actually, let's say, had something toxic in it, your body would flinch. Your sixth sense would make your body flinch, and you go, oh, can't eat that, and you just move on. So that's the concept of muscle testing, and it's such a biological way to think about how we can use that to connect to everything in our environment. And then dowsing is just a little step up from that. It's a confirmation of this intuition.
Okay, so just the cell grazing, obviously you've been a proponent as part of the whole holistic resource management. You've seen the changes associated with it. You've got dung beetles and things like that. You've got all that fine since you're organic as well.
Yeah, so you might have, as you drove up, you might have not been looking, but the dung was being completely drawn down into the soil. You could see that fence line effect where, and as I said, we're running most probably a Ferrari now, where if we go half a day too long, we can damage things.
Yeah.
So we've got to be careful. And so Sean's really learning this work, and we're constantly watching animal performance, watching all of these.
You have mobs of about 150.
We've got bigger mobs, so we've got the breeding mobs, anything up to 300 head.
Yeah.
But they run in a lot bigger area, and we're reducing those paddocks as well. But the greatest power of cell grazing is to allow you to do your stock budgets. Your fodder budgets.
Your fodder budgets.
Fodder budgets. So if you know what feed you've got ahead of you and it stops raining, you know how many days you've got to when you're out of feed. So if you're out of feed, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, Graeme? If you ran out of feed, what would you do?
Sell up.
Yeah.
selling
So
some
would you
cattle.
sell up when you're out of feed, or
Yeah,
would you sell up
beforehand,
before you're out of seed?
Yeah.
So it gives you a massive advantage because we know at any time how much feed we've got left.
Yeah.
Because I can just, and it's very simple. We had 100, let's say 150 head were in there for 3 days. So that's 450 stock days of feed we pulled out of that paddock. Claudia, what do you reckon, half a day left in that paddock?
I haven't really looked.
Yeah.
I don't know the area, and it's very big for me.
Yeah.
I looked at it, it's very big.
So that's 3,000 acres, 3,500 acres you've got here.
Yeah, so nearly four and a half left.
Worth 1,000 cows.
Yeah.
And the goats and a few other things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see the power that gives you. So we can look at every paddock in this rotation and we can compare it to that paddock. So it's really simple. It's not complicated cuts and all this stuff, because that's what the cows are eating.
Yeah.
It's not what you're cutting.
You know exactly what you're
And you go around, assess every paddock against that one they've eaten.
And do you grow some hay or anything as well?
No, we don't grow any hay. If it's standing feed, that's your drought reserves.
Okay.
So we have a policy, if you run out of feed, you've got no cattle left, and you've sold long before you run out of feed.
Yeah.
So in the drought, we were 2 days out from selling everything.
Oh, you got way close.
And we had the sale all lined up. They were all about to go up on Auctions Plus.
And it rained. Yeah, you beauty.
So that's how adamant we are. And this is taught in RCS that anyone who feeds, how do you know when the drought's going to end?
Yeah.
There was properties down in Glen Innes. They were debt-free properties. At the end of the drought, they had $1 million debt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good.
So how are they going to get out of that?
Yeah.
Because they said, no, it's going to rain, it's going to rain, it's going to rain. But if we can understand astrometeorology, maybe we've got another little risk management tool. But that's work in progress.
We'll have to, it's obviously getting too dark to continue, but we'll have to chat again, no doubt. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I think you've got a great deal to offer and some real wisdom. I mean, my take on the whole concept of retirement, people say, I'm 72, you're going to retire, and I say, well, why on earth would I? I mean, it's my passion, it's what I love doing, but more than that, I mean, every culture prior to ours, and we can look back as far as we choose to look, has actually revered the process of getting aged, because you were the elders that could share your wisdom. And now our elders, of course, some of them are damaged, some of them have got Alzheimer's, but our elders have accumulated this massive amount of life wisdom, go off and play golf and live together in one place and don't share it with anyone else. And I think it's just nonsense.
Yeah, it's so sad. And, this is why, Maria and I'd love to die on the farm, as both my parents did. And they died in total peace and happiness. So, what a way to go. And it's cheap. You just build a fire out in the paddock and burn me.
And did your parents can you bury people on the farms here or not?
We went through that exercise. You can't even let them die on the farm.
Okay. All right, beautiful night.
Yeah.
But thanks very much. And
thanks, Graeme. It was enjoyable to chat out in the middle of this paddock.
Yeah, really pleasurable.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.